So g'day everybody, this is Scott Poynton and this is another TFT Earthworm podcast, and I have a very special guest today. It's Jeremy Goon, and Jeremy is the Cheif Sustainability Officer at Wilmar, a TFT member since December 2013, and we had a great experience working together during the second half of 2013. Jeremy, myself, the team from Wilmar, Glenn Horowitz, who we might talk to in another podcast later on. But I'm in Singapore and been with Jeremy the last couple of days at the Innovation Forum meeting, and we thought we'd catch up and have a bit of a chat. So how are you going, Jeremy?
Very good, Scott. I think it's been very interesting time since Wilmar announced our policy. It's been good working with the TFT teams. I think the challenges on the ground that we face with regards to the implementation of our policy has thrown up some challenges which we hadn't anticipated, some of which we had anticipated. But I think the enormity of the challenge has got to do with the fact that we're dealing with so many third-party suppliers. And there's when you have over 1,000 suppliers, it's always extremely difficult to try and make sure that every single one of them understands what your policy even means. You can meet 100 suppliers and you can have 90 different interpretations of your policy, even though they read exactly the same thing. And I think dealing with a regulatory environment which isn't very conducive to the implementation of such sustainability policies also provides another unique challenge.
The interesting thing about that is that we knew it was going to be a challenge going into this, but nonetheless, you guys signed up to a very ambitious policy, and people still reference the policy today as, that was December 2013, we're coming up, it's 2 years in. People still reference it as the leading policy. Let's talk a little bit about how we got to that, and I know here we are choking a little bit in the haze today, but it was a couple of years ago that there was haze as well, and Glenn appeared on Bloomberg TV, and we don't need to go into detail, but for me it was a fascinating journey where we really got the sense that Wilmar's leadership beliefs, and just share with me that bit of that journey there, because I think you guys went into this with your eyes wide open. I think perhaps we anticipated some of the challenges, perhaps not as many hard challenges as we thought, but nonetheless the paper was signed. How did we get there?
That's very interesting. I think for many months we had various different negotiations and discussions and endless meetings, as you remember, Scott. Initially, we tried to get as much of the industry in this as possible to come up with the same sort of policy and commitment so that we'd be able to have what, I think my chairman described as a transformational impact on the industry. But I think after 4 or 5 months of intense, sometimes very animated, sometimes very fiercely vocal discussions.
A lot of passions.
Oh yeah. We were the only ones who were perhaps at that point in time, December 5th, 2013, ready, willing and able to sign such a policy. We did it in the form of a MOU with Unilever. We needed to make sure that one of our biggest customers was also ready, willing and able to commit to such a policy. And my chairman basically decided that that was the right thing to do, and perhaps as the company that traded the most volume of palm oil and perhaps was the most affected by what was happening with all the anti-palm oil campaigns, with the fact that we buy from over 80% of the suppliers in the world, it was perhaps fitting that we were the ones to come up with the policy first. And no one else at that point in time signed up. But as we talk today, 16, 17 months on, you've got over 30 other very, very large companies in the world who've also signed up to very similar policies.
It was a real leap of faith. I think, we remember the time as a time of stress. Everyone was under a lot of pressure, and the NGOs were watching. They were waiting to see what was going to happen, and the company went for it. And we talked at the start about the challenges that we're facing. We had challenges early on with the Sarawak government concerned about what the policy would mean for smallholders there in Sarawak. But discussions were had and things were moved through. I know our guys have had meetings with you and the team, the Wilmar team in Indonesia, with 300 suppliers in the room. We've seen a few breaches of the policy. The NGOs have been actually, I think, quite terrific in highlighting breaches. But I've also said to people, let's not judge the success of the policy by the breaches. Let's judge the success of the policy by how the company responds to the breaches. And I think we've had some cases where the NGOs have highlighted some deforestation, but engagement by Wilmar and the TFT teams with those suppliers have seen machines turned off and studies done, forests set aside. How do you think we're going? What's your... Kim Yong, the CEO of Wilmar, always asks us to give him a score out of 10 on various things. How do you think we're going, as a team to implement this?
As a team, probably 7 out of 10 as a team. I think there are always going to be lots and lots of challenges. I don't believe in giving very high scores out of 10 anyway, so 7 is actually a good score for me. With regards to, I think, some of the challenges that we faced as well, it's been extremely challenging dealing with governments especially, I think. and dealing with the many different agendas that the various different competitors and also the various different suppliers have in various different regions. Very, very unique set of circumstances and perspectives that each one faces. And I think we had to go through the very long process of making sure that each one actually understood what compliance with our policy meant. These breaches in policy, actually they're good things, because what actually happens is it intensifies or catalyzes engagement. And we've had a lot of success in terms of when we found out a certain supplier breached our policy, we would immediately have an intensive discussion. And in most cases, they've actually turned full circle. And some of them have actually even come up with policies of their own, which are almost as good as ours. A lot of those successes have not been highlighted because we've been head down and trying to get more of this done. There have been, of course, highlights of certain breaches, but again, certain things that people don't know is that as soon as a supplier gets a call from us, most of the time they will come straight to the table and turn the machines off.
You guys are very active in the industry, as you said earlier. 80% of the market, 80% of the growers you tend to buy from at one time or another. So you do have that leverage. But I think it goes beyond a commercial leverage. I think Wilmar's got a lot of respect in the industry, and people, if they're supplying Wilmar, it's a bit of a badge of honour. They like to put it in their reports that they're supplying Wilmar. So how do you think that you've developed that spirit between yourself and your suppliers over the years? I mean, the company's been going, 24 years now? Not long, really, in the history of companies, but you've managed to develop yourself into, the world's largest palm oil company in terms of the supplying volume. How did you guys go about it? I mean, what are the ingredients that you think you've brought to the table that you've got this respect and trust now and relationship with your suppliers that has them listening to you when you've come out with a, really leading policy on these things? What's that secret ingredient that Wilmar has?
I'm not sure what the secret ingredient is, but I think that being a big integrated company, we're able to sort of join the dots between what the suppliers are at the upstream all the way down to the retailers on the downstream, who, again, require their products to be dealing from deforestation and various other risks that they don't want their brand associated with. I think it was important for us to try and explain that to our suppliers and get them to understand that in order to remain competitive and relevant going forward, that certain changes had to be made to perhaps the way they ran their businesses, to the way they would expand, and in the way that we actually do business with them. So I think, things like integrity, honesty, and overall, I think, respect for all the suppliers that we've dealt with. And many of the suppliers that we've dealt with for over 20 years, and quite a few of them actually supply most of what they produce all to us. So I think there's been a lot of mutual respect. Respect is earned, and I think it's important that we continue this journey with our suppliers together, as opposed to basically coming down on them and saying, this is our policy and you have to comply, otherwise you're out. I think this leverage that we have, this ability to engage with them, is extremely important. We also reach out to them and say that if there are any problems that they may have, or if there's any help that they may need, we're basically there to support them through it and for them to comply with this policy and understand it and basically go down their own path to sustainability.
We're seeing it work, and it's really encouraging. Now, what about challenges and changes within Wilmar? We know that you've got the trading arm, you've got the sustainability team. This is a common issue, I think, in many companies where they've got a commercial arm and a sustainability arm. You're embedded very deeply within the company as a Cheif Sustainability Officer. You're not out to the side, as we see in a lot of companies. What would have been the challenges, do you think? And I know they've existed where, as a sustainability team, have said, hold on a minute, that supplier's not doing the right thing. And the trading arm will go, hold on, we need that volume for our refinery. There's been those challenges. How have you guys grappled with that? And what do you think has been the outcome?
Very good question, Scott. I think one of the key challenges that we always knew we would face was with our procurement teams on the ground, and to get them to understand exactly what this policy was all about. I think without the full support of our board and of course our chairman, it would have been impossible to get buy-in from the rest of our colleagues internally. I think that was perhaps one of the biggest challenges that faced us when we first issued the policy, and it took actually a couple of months before we had perhaps what I would call full buy-in from all the key procurement guys and the traders and some of the other commercial guys, which perhaps didn't see sustainability as part of their portfolio or their interests.
You're an RSPO member, founding member, I think. You're on the board of RSPO. Perhaps did they feel that was enough? That gave them the sustainability level that you need. Was there elements of that, do you think?
Well, I think, the sort of history with the RSPO goes back a bit longer than our policy. But I certainly think that quite a few of our traders had gotten used to the idea of, if we're just RSPO members or if we're RSPO certified, that would be sufficient. But I think many of them, after many discussions with a lot of their customers as well, realized that perhaps we needed to go a few steps further. So I think a lot of them realized that wasn't quite enough. But I think one of the key things that we've seen in terms of changes within Wilmar, we get asked by various different stakeholders, some of the financial analysts as well who cover us, and they often ask me a question about what is the cost of sustainability, what's the cost of implementing this, and they talk about premiums and everything. And we decided a couple of years ago, after we announced the policy, that there's no separate cost for sustainability. We wouldn't cost it as a cost for sustainability per tonne. Everything was embedded into the costs of the running of the operations. It's part of the cost of doing business. It's integral to our business model, and that's something that our chairman stressed to quite a few analysts as well. So I think that's the way we look at it is quite different from perhaps the way some of the other companies would look at it, who would have a separate sustainability cost, and in that way perhaps that kind of segments sustainability into a different category from the cost of doing business, which I don't think is the right way to go.
It's very clear to me in our discussions with Mr. Kwok, the chairman of Wilmar, that it's absolutely something that he's very passionate about, and he sees it as the only way forward for the industry. So I think that top-down strength and support has been integral to you guys moving forward. So that's a great case. Now, you mentioned your customers and the investors. What's the sense there? I mean, a lot of the customers, of course, have got their own no deforestation policies. Do you see them coming to you, and how's the business going? Is there a business case for this? Do you feel that sustainability, well, you always had sustainability with your participation in RSPO. You've gone further with the no exploitation, no deforestation peatland policies. What do you think has been perhaps the business case? Are you looking back on this saying, not only was it great for our values, but actually it's been great for our bottom line?
I certainly think it'll be good for our bottom line in the long term. It's probably not the right time to ask me about the bottom line now, because we're seeing low commodity prices all over the world for all commodities. But in terms of building long-lasting, long-term relationships with big brands and big customers, it certainly does help. And I think when you start going deeper than just a buyer-seller relationship, and you start developing applications and different products and tailored products for some of the big brands and big customers, it tells you that there is a long future in terms of the relationship, a much deeper relationship that's not going to just go away because you give a discount or your price is a little bit too high.
We started talking about the challenges. I think what's happened, and it's not just in the palm oil sector, but we see it in other sectors as well, where the environmental NGOs tend to have a louder voice. They've got a bit of a megaphone. And what tends to happen is companies then respond by looking at the no deforestation stuff first. In a way, hard as it is, it's the easier part of the equation. We're now looking, I know, with Wilmar at the no exploitation side. There's reports have come out of trouble with labour rights, or exploitation of workers, foreign workers in particular, migrant labourers. What's the challenges, do you think, ahead in that space, and how do you think we can tackle them?
I think there will be some challenges ahead, especially in Malaysia, because the unique situation about the palm oil industry in Malaysia is that they're very dependent on foreign labour, especially Indonesian labour.
78% or something of the industry, I think.
Over 80% of the industry depends on Indonesian labour. It's quite simple, like in Singapore as well. You have a situation where all of the service jobs, being a waiter or a waitress, basically the Singaporeans don't want this job, so they have to depend on foreign workers for this. And similarly, for the Malaysian palm industry, the Malaysians don't want to do the jobs of harvesters or sprayers or various other jobs within the plantation. So that has to be imported. And when you have, let's say, laws and regulations which don't quite match up to what's expected from a global perspective, or are inadequate to deal with some of the social complications that may arise with the importation of foreigners into a domestic workforce, you're going to have to make sure that everything from the procurement to the way they are treated, they are handled, everything has to be done above and beyond what regulation is today, to the expectations of your global stakeholders.
Yeah, we focused on the no deforestation, as I said, but we're moving into that no exploitation space now, and I think we can see some good progress coming up there. I'm talking to Jeremy Goon, who's the Cheif Sustainability Officer at Wilmar, and it's a fascinating program that we've got with Wilmar because, as Jeremy said at the start, they have thousands of suppliers, and in terms of plantations, over 1,000 mills, I think, Jeremy, thereabouts. So you've bitten off a big challenge here. When you published the policy back in December 2013, the commitment was that we'd be well advanced on this, have the boxes ticked by the end of 2015. That's a few months away. How are we going?
Good question, Scott. I think with regards to the traceability part, which we felt was an integral part of the implementation of our policy, I think we've announced and we launched our sustainability dashboard in January this year. I think it was the first time any sort of big agricultural player had put their entire supply chain publicly available online. I think we will get full traceability back to our mills by the end of this year, and that's well on track. I think the challenges lie with the smallholder element in our supply chain, and that will require additional time because of various different constraints that we have. One of the biggest constraints that we have for the smallholders in the oil palm supply chain, especially in Indonesia, is legality and land title. Many of them don't even have land titles. So how is it possible for us to map back to the actual smallholder plantations or the smallholder holdings if they don't even have legal land title? They can't even tell you what land they actually own, which means that they're not even able to go to a bank, a local bank, and say, I'd like a loan, because when the bank asks them, right, we'll give you a loan, but where's your land title? We need that as collateral. They can't even give the bank that, so the bank basically says, sorry, there's no loan. And what happens is they're then subject to perhaps more unscrupulous elements and have to get their loans elsewhere from perhaps loan sharks who have much higher interest rates, or other people who would then subject them to exploitation. So I think there are a lot of challenges that remain in the smallholder space, which we're working together with quite a few of the other NGOs as well as TFT to try and resolve before I think we can get full clarity back to the plantations. But we would certainly have full traceability back to the mills by the end of 2015.
Very good. Well, we could probably talk for the next 4 hours, Jeremy. I mean, I think that you guys are grappling with a big challenge. But you mentioned right at the start about the government, and we should just touch on them because I think there's lots of issues rising up now with the Indonesian government in particular against IPOP, the Indonesian Palm Oil Pledge, of which Wilmar was a founder. And I think that with the haze going out there's lots of stress and tension, and who's lighting the fires, and what's your sense of where this is going to go?
I think with regards to IPOP, a little bit on IPOP, I think when the major players, major refiners of oil palm in Indonesia, ourselves and other big companies like GAR and Musimas and Cargill came up together with the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce, Kadin, to form IPOP. I think one of the main objectives of forming IPOP was to basically go and officially engage the Indonesian government to have a regulatory change which would allow a successful implementation of our policy. So a change of the regulatory environment, which perhaps wouldn't have allowed us to fully implement our policy. So I think that's progressing. It will continue to be complicated, but I think that's certainly progressing. We made a lot of progress in the last few months, but a lot more needs to be done. That will take some time to do. We're working very intensively on that, as are other companies, as well as the newly formed Secretariat of IPOP. The haze and the systemic reasons behind the haze certainly don't help the situation, or in some ways actually they do. They help to catalyze or intensify some of these particular discussions. And I think pressures from neighbours like Singapore and Malaysia in terms of the Indonesian government trying to deal with the haze as well would perhaps further accelerate some of these important discussions.
It's my sense. I mean, I think, I said to people, look, we're getting to the bottom of the U. People won't change unless they're uncomfortable. And I think what we're seeing with the haze now is that it's not the first time this has happened. In fact, it happens every year. It's very bad this year. It's not the first time it's been very bad. And people are sort of getting to the point like, we've got to see some change. You can't just sort of write this off, it's a hot year, or yeah, it's a bit unfortunate. It's every year. I hope we're getting to the bottom of the U where things can't get much worse, as it were. And I think what's really encouraging is when you see the framework for regulatory change, it often starts with the NGOs, the companies get it and start to change, and then the government starts to get it because they've got the confidence that if they make regulatory changes, they won't disadvantage companies, which will cost jobs. In fact, what we're seeing now is the companies and the NGOs going to the government with the same request and the same ideas. Hopefully that's going to lead us down a great path. Jeremy, we're coming to the end. The future. It's very hard to gaze into this crystal ball, especially when it's full of haze at the moment. But where do you think we're going to be as the palm oil industry is going to be in 10 years' time?
Wow, 10 years' time.
Well, let's talk 2 or 5 will do. But what do you think the future looks like? The policies have been a way of drawing a line and in the sand against all of the claims that were being made against Wilmar and the other companies that have taken these policies of causing deforestation. You've set out your own policy for where you want to be. But what's the vision for the industry, do you think? And where's Wilmar and the industry going to be? You're the leaders. I think everyone's racing to catch up with Wilmar. Where are you guys going to be in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years' time?
I think the vision would entail an industry which is, first of all, less criticised, its reputation less tarnished than it has been, an industry which is which can be looked at as progressive. I think it'll be important for me to see the palm oil industry in 2, 5, 10 years' time as an industry which has taken the bull by its horns, has dealt with its significant sustainability questions and issues and challenges, and has emerged stronger than any other agricultural commodity. I think for some of the work and some of the issues and challenges that this industry has faced, we've already perhaps tackled more than most other commodities produced anywhere in the world. But I think that's important because palm oil is traditionally grown plus 10 minus 10 of the equator, and that's usually where the most biodiverse parts of the world exist. And I think it's important for an industry like ours to be responsible, especially for the lands that it's expanding into, growing consumption of the world. I think it's very important for us to remain as competitive and relevant as possible, and that would mean as sustainable as possible.
The journey continues, Jeremy, and it's a pleasure to be working with you guys and facing the challenges together. And I've got a great vision for the industry too. I think it can get there, but many challenges ahead. So thanks very much for talking with us today, and we look forward to getting an update in the future.
Thanks, Scott. Cheers.